Hello, this is Scott Jenkins, Senior Solutions Engineer here at SonicWall. And today we're going to talk about making the invisible visible. Uh, with today's firewalls, there's so much traffic going across. How do we capture the information that we need to report on, from user authentication to applications, a number of different things. So we're going to go through some of those best practices today on how to configure the firewall so that you can get the most out of that. Uh, in the Northern California area, we have Mary Parkhurst, who's the territory account manager, Tara Paisley, who's a channel account manager, works directly with all of our partners, and Kelvin Peters, solutions engineer, with me in the territory, and author of quite a few videos on our channel. So good guy to know. All right, so right now we're going to kind of look at our platform, right? So SonicWall has the Capture Security Center. That's kind of our web management portal. From there, you can work with endpoints, managing your firewalls, wireless, SASE, and a number of different things. All of those different products integrate in with our Capture ATP. That's our advanced threat protection and our cloud sandbox. And the RTDMI is actually real-time deep memory inspection. This is SonicWall's patented detection mechanism, and it is so far, I believe, enjoying its 7th consecutive ICSA labs run with 100% detection, and I think only one false positive. That's collectively over 30,000 tests, I believe. So quite a good score. Anyway, and this all part of our Capture Labs environment, right? So I'll build this out here real quick, but basically we just kind of went through all that. If you're looking for any new events coming up in the future, hit sonicwall.com/events, and you'll be able to find out what's going on. We always have something going on there to help you out. All right, so we're going to concentrate on making the visible visible. So we're going to talk about our security services. We'll go through SNMP monitoring real quick, automation, meaning email setup, how to get your firewall to alert you when a log comes up, log file events, LDAP authentication, syslog, a real quick DPI SSL. I plan on doing another presentation that goes much deeper into DPI SSL to help you out. And then, of course, APPFLOW reporting and monitoring. We'll finish up, I believe, with a little bit of the capture threat report that you can pull directly from the firewall. All right, so the premise of this, of course, right? If you don't log it, you can't report on it. So we'll talk about logging and email alerting, authentication of users. So is this Active Directory via LDAP, Radius to Okta or some other identity management solution, Duo, a number of different platforms. Syslog, of course, to a SIM or to your local syslog server for later queries. DPI SSL, if 80% or so of the traffic crossing that firewall is encrypted, being able to get in and decrypt that traffic for inspection becomes important. AppFlow reporting on the firewall will give you an idea of who's doing what and be able to see the type of applications and web categories that are crossing your firewall. So with that, we'll go ahead and start with the security services configuration. And of course, this is a baseline, so I'm kind of going through it and trying to set you up for kind of a best practice, but really, we can't 100% guarantee anything. So make sure you evaluate these settings for your environment. So first of all, so security services to configure, right? So we have a lot of different settings from, the summary settings, antivirus. Of course, Capture ATP is our multi-engine sandbox up on the cloud. Anti-spyware intrusion prevention and detection, GUIP, and the rest of the services. So they're all going to act and may catch a conversation at different levels. If something passes through the antivirus, maybe a signature hasn't been written yet, it's a 0-day, and you don't have Capture ATP turned on, which is why you want to have Capture ATP turned on. But let's say it gets past the antivirus, reaches out to its botnet command and control servers. That's where the botnet filter or the intrusion prevention service may catch it, right? So it's all works together. So Ogres have layers, communication networks have layers, right? We want to make sure that depending on where we catch it, we can catch that intrusion, or infection at multiple steps in the process. So if we don't catch it at the first layer, we catch it at the second, right? So the point's to make sure that it never gets to the end goal. So first step, detection prevention from hackers. So inside of your, inside the network tab, firewall and advanced, you'll see two settings, enable stealth mode and randomize IP ID. You'll make sure you want to turn both of those on. I'm not going to read the text to you, but go ahead and check that out, and kind of gives you an idea. Helps mask and make sure, not make the SonicWall so easy to detect. We want to make the any attackers have to wonder and not tailor their attacks for a specific device. On the summary page, enhanced security, right? So turning this on provides kind of the maximum security posture from the amount of things that it will inspect. There can be a performance hit on it because we are logging and inspecting quite so much. So, but from a security stance, our best practice is to turn that on once a day, sometimes multiple times in a day. We'll go through and reload the antivirus databases. You can drop all packets during that inspection time, like I have here configured. Of course, if it's dropping that packet, that could create an outage. Briefly, it's only a few seconds, but it can create a micro outage. So keep that in mind and either set the precedence or leave that off. But from a security point of view, if we're reloading those databases, you don't want traffic to pass through during that time. Gateway antivirus, right? Turning it all on, making sure it's enabled inbound and outbound, and make sure that we're catching everything. TCP stream works on catching those different protocols on different ports where the service may not necessarily be obvious. It's not turned on by default, so I would definitely make sure that you get TCP stream enabled. Anti-SPYWARE. Here I've got basically detect all, prevent. The low priority spyware can have false positives. Not every software manufacturer really adheres to communication standards, so they can shortcut or do actions that may falsely get them flagged. So I would say that prevent all, of course, is the best case scenario, but go through and evaluate your environment, see what works best. And we'll go, kind of tailor that, but having all of them enabled would be the best step. But if you didn't have that one going, I think you should be all right. Again, intrusion prevention, same thing, right? Detect all, preventing the high and medium, the low, evaluating your environment. GeoIP, so you can turn that on, and that's going to be by country. So there may be certain countries that you want to block, and then of course enable logging to make sure that the firewall is collecting those logs. GeoIP kind of part two, right? Just to see what that country tabs looks like. So it's going to be a list of countries, pull over countries that maybe aren't so friendly for us, anonymous, proxy, right? If we don't know who that is, then we don't want to allow it. And then of course, some of the favorite players. BOTNET filtering, kind of the same as GUIP. You can turn that on for all connections, or you can do firewall rule-based for GUIP or BOTNET. But again, enable that, turn on logging, and make sure that that BOTNET filter service is running. App control. So we want to turn on app control. That'll start detecting, looking through our application database and identifying the different apps that are crossing your firewall. You want to make sure that that logging is turned on. File name logging, I think if you were in a highly regulated environment, banking, government, military, those kind of things, you probably would want that turned on. Most people don't, but again, evaluate that for your environment and configure it accordingly. Content filtering, so you want to turn that on. And really the whole point of this is to make sure that we're keeping people from unintentionally going to places they don't want to go to. Make sure exclude administrator. So right now with that checked, that means if you're logged on as admin and you go to a site that is filtered, the administrator would be excluded and it would allow you to go to that environment. So you may want to disable the exclude administrator. But I just wanted to bring that up, make sure that we cover that. So when you're testing, you get the response that you should or expect. Some of the different categories, right? I would recommend blocking at a minimum. Of course, we want the adult sites going, hacking and proxy avoidance, malware. And if there's a site that's not rated, I would suggest, block it, and then you can always allow those in a URI list as needed. So APPFLOW reporting. So it's important to turn on the APPFLOW collector to the local collector. When you enable this, it'll only function after a reboot of the firewall. So as you're going through and you're configuring all these different security services, once you're done, go ahead and plan a reboot of that firewall before you really put it into production. But this one's important for that APPFLOW connector. SNMP monitoring. From the device menu, you're going to go to Firewall, SNMP menu. Go ahead and enable that green checkbox, and then go ahead and you want to hit the configure button. So once you've clicked on that configure button, you're going to get a window. Here I'm just doing SNMP version 2. We do, of course, support version 3. Make sure you set your get community names, and then we are a security host. We will not allow anybody to just randomly poll SNMP. So make sure you put the IP address in the host fields of any of your SNMP polling nodes. So you want to make sure that those are all filled out. You want to enable it. At this point, you've enabled it globally, but you must actually enable it on the interface that you want to collect it from. So this could be the management interface. Here, this is the LAN port X0 that has to be enabled. So you want to make sure that that has been configured, and that'll allow that interface to listen for SNMP. What if you have a multi-site environment and your SNMP probe is at only one of those sites? So in a site-to-site VPN tunnel, you can go to the Advanced tab, and under the Management via, enable the SNMP service there so that that service can cross the firewall and that the firewall will listen to that SNMP, as well as HTTPS. So if you want to be able to get to the management interface on that far end firewall across that tunnel, you want to make sure that you go ahead and check those boxes as well. So whatever's appropriate for your environment. Email automation. So what I did here is I actually created an Outlook.com address, although you can do this, a lot of free email accounts out there. And I set up an application password. So this will allow you to kind of bypass the 2FA login and have a long pre-generated kind of a complex key for your email account, and then use that for the firewall to be able to email out. So here I went ahead and set that up and configured. As you can see, I used my little test account here, SDJ, and go through. So once that's done, and I'll put some of these different web links that I have on these. I'll try to put these in the video in the notes so you guys have access to these different links, just so you can go back and find some of the links here that I've posted in the presentation, just to call that out. From here, you're going to go ahead and really, when you look at the granularity of our logs, right, anything that's set to alert will create an email if it's tripped. The SonicWall actually gathers the same amount of information regardless of the priority of it. The priority is really for you to be able to filter those so that you can find relevant alerts by priority. So putting it from inform to debug to warning, the firewall will still collect the same amount of information, but it makes it easier for you to find the things that are relevant. One of the things you'll learn pretty quick when you load the application control is the default logging for application control detection alert. That means every time the firewall learns an application, it's going to send you an email. I generated about 1,000 emails in 3 hours, which will lock a free account at times. So make sure that you change that one to inform. Learning about each individual application being learned or seen isn't necessarily of great importance unless you need that for your environment. But I would suggest you change that one to inform for a little safety. Otherwise, your alerts, a valid alert can sit in the middle of a bunch of non-invalid alerts, right? So needle in a haystack of needles. So I would suggest you change that. Logging and alerting. So here's a sample email that I got. We actually got a TCP null flag attack against my X1 interface. Gives you the type of attack, where it came from, your WAN, the destination, the source MAC really is probably your next upstream default gateway, but the source IP is where that's at. If you're not sure what a TCP null attack is, it's really someone sending empty TCP fields with the flag field empty. So it's not an ACK or a FIN or any of those, and it's really looking to detect open ports. So they're probing to find an open port before they target and launch an attack. Looking at that source IP, yep, China. So something to take a look at. So again, you could use your GUIP and go ahead and block China and as a whole, in this case, if I was being attacked, or go through and actually grab that subnet and add that in there as a blocked subnet via rule. So you have a couple different options there. There's so much business and commerce going back and forth between US, China, and other countries. Sometimes that's best, but you can block a country and then go ahead and put in an exclusion and free up a certain company. So if you do happen to have some business, you can't do it from the other way. Block them all, but allow a few exceptions. So that's one of the great things about SonicWall. You're hardly ever plugged into all or nothing. There's always an include or exclude ability on a lot of these different levels. User authentication. So one of the things we're going to talk about is LDAP authentication, right? Your firewall's talking to your local Active Directory server, or you can do LDAP over TLS. We've pushed that against Google services, Azure, those kind of things, and user guide. And again, I'll put these links up in there. But this is kind of the active session, user session information that you should see. There are different types of users. There are local users to the firewall. I definitely would suggest as a best practice as an administrator to make sure you create your own account. If you're logging in with an AD account and AD is down, for instance, you won't be able to log in. So make sure you have a way to get past that. LDAP and LDAP plus local users definitely will allow you from an authentication model. It goes through and it'll look at local Active Directory, local users, and then we actually have a directory services connector as well. If you're using NTLM authentication, which is the most common, where you're pulling it from the browser, you actually would use Radius plus local, and then set up like a network policy server service on your domain controller. And the firewall would do that via Radius. Or if you can push that to Okta or any other IDP program as well via Radius. So that's kind of your generic connector, so to speak. The directory services connector. So this is just a service running on a domain join machine, and you can tie your firewall to that directory services connector. There are going to be certain things that won't NTLM authenticate, a Synology NAS, vCenter, but they need to go out to the web, pull down by firmware updates. vCenter has your life cycle, updates, patches, those kind of things. So you can actually tie an AD account to vSphere and Synology and get that reporting in your firewall so that you know where those devices are going. If you know where those devices are going, that's a great way to put a rule in and make sure that those devices only go to those destinations. So in case they get compromised, they don't have free reign, right? So kind of a little bit of a control in the IoT world, right? And so from here, like for instance, I tied this address 172.16.103.10 to Maximus is my domain with I actually have an actual AD account called Synology that it maps to. And so anytime that IP address goes out, it's automatically tied to that username via AD, and it will authenticate correctly. So the directory services connector will allow you to do that. It works with Novell if you have Novell out there, terminal services. So if you have terminal server environments, there is an agent that will go through that you can load on the terminal server that'll pull the session information so you can get accurate users across a multi-user host. So there's a number of different things you can do on this, or to end-time multiple firewalls in an environment to AD or different domain controllers, those kind of things. So once you have that integration, now I can go in, here's a picture of a rule, and I can actually go through and pick user groups to assign my roles to. So the kind of things that you can do, access rules, right? So you can create, you can only allow a certain group of users to access something on the network or across the VPN to a data center. So now it gives you the ability to change rights very easily, to upgrade permissions by even your lower techs can just change an AD group to allow that through. So it makes it a little bit easier to make changes without having someone having to get into the firewall. Content filtering, that's even more true. Most organizations have multiple levels of users. It's much easier to tie your content filters, policies or profiles enforcement against different AD groups. And then again, it's really easy to just make people members of those different groups. But app rules, VPN access, DPI SSL, you can actually assign by service, by IP address, or network, as well as, of course, user groups. So this gives you an ability to surgically assign your DPI SSL to the users that it needs. AppFlow reporting and monitoring, you'll actually be able to filter on a username and then be able to get reporting on that single user going through. And that's really the whole point of this presentation, right? How are we going to be able to enable all of that logging so that you can get the information you need? Syslog setup is a pretty simple one. We'll kind of go through, Syslog server is just a centralized logging system. It allows you to kind of collect from different pieces of equipment around your network and have all of those pull in events into a central database that you can query. So for us, it's pretty easy. You go to navigate, log, syslog, hit add, and then of course set up and grab the name of your server. You would create an address object to do that, and then go ahead and for here, this is just a default configuration, but just as an example. DPI SSL, that stands for Deep Packet Inspection with SSL Decryption. So by default, a client will open up an HTTPS session. Let's say we're going to Facebook or Dober.com, whatever, and it basically creates an end-to-end tunnel to that website, and it's encrypted. So the firewall can see the header, it can see where things are going, but it has no idea what the payload is. And is that really what it says it is, or is it another protocol running over HTTPS, right? So that the firewall can only do a certain amount of checking there. So DPI SSL, what it does is it actually creates an encrypted tunnel between the client and the firewall, and a second tunnel from the WAN interface out to that tunnel. So as that traffic moves from one tunnel to another, it's momentarily unencrypted or decrypted, and you'll be able to go ahead and inspect that through all of our normal security services. So it's a significant performance dump. Looking at these two slides, you're going to see the first one, right? That packet just sails right through the firewall with minimal checking. Here, the firewall is actually maintaining two separate SSL sessions and actually doing that deep packet inspection. So there's a definite hit. This is an industry-wide process. It's kind of a sanctioned man-in-the-middle attack, and so, but this allows you to get that visibility, and this is really what that would look like. Go through. So the client creates its own session. We do provide our own DPI SSL certificate on the firewall, or you can get a certificate from a CA, public CA, and make sure, you know, for your domain. Make sure it's not just a host. It actually must have certificate signing ability, not just kind of a who I am, but actual the ability to re-sign. But basically, each client will create its side and generate those connections, and you'll see those different certs show up on either side, as a for instance. Always make sure that you authenticate the user, so the firewall will go out to wherever that endpoint is, that website, and make sure that they're using a valid certificate authority. If it's not, then it'll go ahead and break that connection. So we don't have someone going to possibly a spoof site or something using a invalid, you know, web cert. If there are applications that are doing certificate pinning, or there's some other issues here, the website is actually using old SSL3 encryption, but it can create issues with being able to get into a device. You can actually go into those sets. Here I did speed test, you know, .NET, they actually are using an old SSL3 certificate, and you can go ahead and check those boxes and exclude this. And there is a built-in list already of sites that you can exclude. So exclude on things that you absolutely need. It's okay to block, you know, some things. That's the whole point of this, right? So if you're not valid, or if you're not using today's encrypt, you know, you really have to decide if you want that traffic to pass. And so that failure is okay. That's part of the filtering list of sites that are appropriate. And again, I'll go into this in much more detail in a separate presentation. So AppFlow reporting and monitoring, right? So going through, looking at, and making sure, you have to make sure that you are in the config mode. But if you click on device and then AppFlow monitoring, here you'll see each of these different applications are here. The sessions, as you can tell, blue, they're hyperlinks. You can click in and ring into those. You know, so here, you know, we have Outlook.com, Teams, Ring Central, right? All the different applications that are crossing this. If you want to click on the sessions and see where those sessions are coming from, you can do that. And then of course up at the top there you see add filter. So you can add filtering on a number of different fields and try to actually thin out this report to hone down on something that you're looking for. And again, this is right on the firewall. You don't have to buy any additional licenses. Really, the only thing that's required is that you have a security subscription of some kind on the firewall. Here I went ahead and went to the user tab, clicked on the add to filter, and actually added my name in as a filtered person. Now you'll see that in the bar under user as Jenkins. Now everything that you see from applications, web activity, initiator IPs are all going to be traffic based on my username here in this field. So that is the only user that's viewable, and this will allow you to get some of that per user data right off the firewall. As a for instance here, I hit web activity, right, and I went ahead, and you can actually group this by domain name, URL, even a ratings category, and see your different sessions. So it gives you kind of a good quick list of who's doing what. In the newer Gen 7 firewalls, you can actually push logging to secondary storage. So now this information will stay in the firewall longer, will survive a reboot. In the Gen 7, it's something you have to configure, but you can actually push your logs to that secondary storage and allow it to hold and give a much longer sample size than what we have had historically. The CTA report, this is our capture threat assessment report right underneath the AppFlow monitor here. And you can actually generate this, and this will pull from all the information in that firewall. It'll put it together and kind of generate a report for you. You can have it automatically happen since restart, or within a certain time frame, those kind of things, and even go in and somewhat white label that, right? Put into who it's for, the customer. There are some fields there under the advanced options. Here's just kind of like a couple screens to kind of show you what that would look like. So it'll create an executive summary. Here it's going to list those 88 applications, how many threats it saw, exploits, vulnerable apps, those kind of things, right? So looking at the different protocols, things that went through, who's using LastPass here, right? Or what type of ads. We can definitely see that Office 365 is by far our #1 app. Go through what we can work through, and it'll actually go through application by level, by CVE risk level, and it'll go through some of those different applications. Some of them are generic protocol, some of those, like you'll see Skype down there, or SMTP. So we'll work through on all of that to try to define where that application risk is. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. And check out all the different apps or videos that we've got up on the channel. We're working to continuously update these. So thank you very much, and take care.